Well, our next guests are interesting because it's a husband and wife, and it is Elizabeth Brady and Christian Brady. And I know a lot of people are wondering how they can honor their children after a loss, and they're going to tell you about their organization and what they've done. They established the Mac Brady Memorial Soccer Fund in honor of their son, and they'll tell us about how they did it and their thoughts. And it's wonderful to have a husband and wife on working together to build memorials. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Our son Mac died of a blood infection. It was sepsis. It came out of nowhere, and within 36 hours, it was New Year's Eve. He was on a helicopter at about 11:30 at night, being flown from State College, Pennsylvania, down to Hershey Medical Center, Penn State Medical Center. And we didn't know until we got to the hospital, but he passed away on the helicopter. And, there was no preparation. There was no indication that there was anything wrong. It just looked like a flu. But as we drove back at 3 a.m. to go pick up our daughter, who was Izzy, who was at a sleepover, we started talking about what we should do and how we should allow others to really participate in the grief with us. I mean, we wanted to remember our son, certainly, but we also knew that there would be others who'd want to participate. And I guess because I'm an academic dean, I've spent a lot of time helping folks establish memorials, scholarships, and things in honor of their loved ones. And so while we thought for a moment about doing something for the life flight crew, because they were just amazing and we know it impacted them, we wanted to celebrate and remember Mac as he lived, with his vibrancy and joy. And he loved soccer, and he was a goalkeeper, and everybody told us he was actually really an exceptional goalkeeper. And so State College, Pennsylvania, home of Penn State, it's a small town. In fact, the church had never been so full for the funeral. All of the deans and the president and provost came. And but what we wanted is we decided we wanted Mac, who dreamed of being a Penn State goalkeeper, we wanted his name then to be associated. So we created a fund, and we figured we'd have to put a lot of money into it ourselves. And there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of people who have donated. And what emerged, and Elizabeth will share with you about the clinic and things as well, what emerged was a way not just for us to grieve, but for Mac's buddies, all the families around who just didn't know Mac, but kind of knew about us. And just, I'm sure Father Al experienced this too. When a young child dies inexplicably, there's this outpouring, and it provided that context. And now the last thing I'll say is that on the other side, in terms of a legacy in its most positive way, what this has allowed is a couple of times a year at the clinic in January, usually, and then at the Big Ten home opener when Penn State plays their first home Big Ten soccer match. We're out there, and there are college students with signs with Mac's name on it. They're cheering on the goalkeeper who bears Mac's name. So he stays alive in a very real way and will long after we're gone. Elizabeth?
Thank you. And I just want to add to that, because it's kind of interesting now. We're coming on 10 years since Mac died. He died New Year's Eve 2012. So we're coming into this important decade. I remember, reading so many different things after Mac died. And I remember reading one from a writer who said, I really think we should measure grief in decades instead of years. And I just remember putting the book away and just thinking, oh my gosh, that is exhausting to think about. And it was too much at that time to think about. And now we're here entering into that decade. And so, especially for the folks who are newly bereaved, I would say it's hard to imagine. But there are surprises along the way. And I think of Anne Lamott with the notion of the in the dirt, the flecks of gold that come. And I think one of the flecks of gold is to be at a Mac clinic and have little kids run up to us with his patch on and just be there. They never met him. They weren't even alive when he was alive, to be inspired by his legacy and his love of sport and his love of friends. And so that continues. But I would also like to say too that one very tangible thing that helps is that to have an event or have something that you love, and it doesn't have to be big to the point that everyone's made today. It doesn't have to be a foundation. It can be any kind of something that they loved, or a meal, or some sort of contribution where you celebrate their life in addition to remembering their death. And I think that both are important. Of course, both are important to recognize, but there is something that frees other people to celebrate him beyond the death day, because as the point has been made here many times, particularly those who are not, in the bereaved community yet are very uncomfortable talking about our continued love for Mac, who has died. And so I think that by having something to celebrate, something that he enjoyed, something people can participate in that's more familiar to them, also somehow opens different doors too. And I think that I think over the years, that's been kind of a surprise to me, is to see how much other friends of his and other folks actually just enjoy celebrating something that he loved. And then we, tie it into other things. But I think that that's helped on a lot of different areas, I would say. Yeah.
Brokenhearted is asking, how long will it be before I can talk about my daughter's death without sobbing? It's been 7 weeks, and I'm sorry, deeply grieved for your loss. Elizabeth just said it's been almost 10 years, and I'm holding back the tears now.
Yeah.
But the little things too. I remember vividly going back on the road for a fundraising trip. For 4 or 5 weeks after Mac passed away, and I was in Chicago O'Hare Airport, and one of the things I had picked up as a little habit was I get a small snow globe for my daughter and a keychain for my son. And, when you travel, you're sort of in a different world. And I was in the little store there picking out a snow globe. And then I went to pick up the keychain, and suddenly it hit me. And I just broke down, and I ran out, called Elizabeth, and she said, buy him a keychain. I mean, I probably have over 100 keychains now, because I continue to do these things and to do these moments. And I think I heard David Kessler say earlier today in terms of finding meaning. And I think this is what Elizabeth and I both are sort of espousing, is that we can imbue these moments with meaning, not to say that the death has to have meaning or redemptive quality itself, but rather from those moments, we can move forward. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, said, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control the choices we make from that moment. And in my book, just a nod to Father Al, and I know he had his book come out, I wrestle with that theological question, that I don't believe God took our children, but I believe God's with us when we move from here. And so much of what we do is action. And I think that's what Elizabeth's saying, that I want to affirm. It's that providing for ourselves these small actions that can become greater memorials, not just the going to a graveside periodically, but real, true celebrations. And that's what's it can be so incredibly hard and difficult, and yet you're inviting other people in that process too. And I think there can ironically, or that's not the right word, but there can be found joy in the remembering.
I just want to piggyback on that too, and say, first off, I'm so sorry. 7 weeks is, I just, hold you and think of you, because it's hard. I was still teaching, and I remember it was very difficult for me it was almost like approaching a campfire. Some days I could come close to it. Some days I felt more confident to speak about Mac and share, and other days I just couldn't go there. And I started to see in myself, some days I felt more confident and sort of different than I did on other days. And I just sort of started to allow myself that was okay. That it's there's no as everyone has said here to do as well, but there's no formula. Some days you feel differently than other days, and some days I'm able to speak. I think time doesn't heal, but it does help in the sense of ownership. And I think this is something that I had to learn myself, which is taking ownership of my continuing role as Mac's mom, whether he was here or not. And many people initially were a little bit uncomfortable with that. And I think that helps through meeting with other peers and other bereaved parents that help, sort of guide the way and help, inspire you in places like this, which are really helpful. But it is a kind of, it's a kind of identity almost as a bereaved parent and Mac's mom that we learn to take on again. And a few tears are okay. I'm heading into 10 years and always happy to cry tears and how much we miss Mac and how much we love him, but also not to be swayed and uncomfortable by the people who get really uncomfortable with me talking about Mac. And to say, I know, and I'm sure before Mac died, I probably would have felt the same way. But I want to say that the love that we have for him has not died, and we celebrate him in our lives in small ways and big ways. And I'm sorry that makes you uncomfortable, but that is something that is so important, and how we share his love the rest of our remaining lives, right? And so I would say, first off, to be gentle with yourself as you grow into this new journey, and also to the notion of the continuing relationship with your child, to be open to the surprises in there too.
I think I would also add, Elizabeth talking about caring for herself and caring for one another. One of the things is to dispel the myth that couples usually statistically end in divorce after a child dies. It's simply not true. The data doesn't bear it out. Elizabeth has an essay on that. But more importantly is to support each other, to recognize when the other needs time. And I don't know what kind of grace it is per se, but over the years, when I've needed to do nothing but bawl, Elizabeth has been able to hold me up. And the same has been true vice versa. When she's needed to express her grief or wanting to go and act in a certain way to help to remember Mac and to do things, it's just been incredibly important for me to support her in doing that in the same way that she supports me. And I think as couples and as families, that's a major part. I remember very poignantly for me growing up, I was about 14 and my grandfather died, my mother's father, very close knit family living together, but also very dysfunctional, for lack of a better word. And Granddad sort of held it all together. And I remember my mother telling me how her mother and her sister were grieving wrong. There are some ways of grieving that are unhealthy, but there are no ways that are wrong. We all are going to grieve differently. And so we have to provide room for one another to do that, to try and coax each other into healthier spaces. I've been very blessed to have a friend and mentor who's a psychiatrist who said, you can go there for a time, but don't linger in that place. Sometimes we need somebody to help walk us out of that sort of oasis of grief. It's okay to go back now and then. It's appropriate, but we don't want to stay there. And I'm looking at these questions from Angelina and Donna and poor Justin, who suffered the murder of a child. put their names here for us so that we can remember them with you. And it will be hard. There's no way around it. It is hard. Jill, I think, made the comment that death is never pretty, even the most peaceful. But we go through it. I use the analogy sometimes that it's like having a beautiful pair of Bostonian shoes. I have to wear a suit most of the time for work. And, Bostonian, they make these really nice men's shoes. But imagine having a beautiful pair of shoes or Prada or something, but they don't fit. They're incredibly tight and they just pinch and they hurt and you've got blisters, but you can never take them off. Initially, you're going to limp and wince and people are going to, what's wrong with you? And you'll say, I've lost my child. I've lost my mother. But eventually the calluses will form. Your walk will kind of balance out a little bit and people won't notice so much, to Father Al's point, right? You'll lose those 24-hour friends will move on. And I think our next speaker is going to talk about how we regain life moving from here. But one of the keys is, no matter how painful, no matter how ill-fitting those shoes are, is that we get up and we take that first step every single day. Some days it's going to hurt like hell. And other days it's still going to hurt like hell, but you'll manage and you'll keep moving. And we just have to be there supporting one another as best we can. That's so much of what this broad community is. Nearly 300 folks here on this conversation. And I think we're also just thankful that we can share the name of Mac. We even have a picture I think they're going to put up here. So these little folks, most of them, as Elizabeth said, weren't even born when Mac passed away. He was a part of a little soccer club we created called the Celtics. They now have over 100 kids as a part of this club and program. And on the left sleeve of their jerseys, they all wear a little patch that has Mac's name and number on it. And that's a legacy. It's a legacy to be proud of.
And I think too, Hun, just to add, because I think we're running out of time here, so we want to respect that, but is that it's the legacy, I think, is where we find meaning in it. It's not so much the the acts of it, but the surprising relationships and the opportunity to share Mac's name, to practice saying their names. As a teacher, I have, unfortunately, so many of my young students whose friends have committed suicide in college and late in high school. It is something that grief is around us so much. And I think that coming to places like this, and especially for Gloria and Heidi, who just host so much and help us, give us tools to not only for ourselves, but to start to help the larger community start to speak about grief and understand it as a part of life that will come. And I think that's another part of this as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Christian and Elizabeth. You guys are amazing at the work you've done and the help you've given people. And thank you again.
Well, thank you for having us.